Well, hello. I am continuing on my trip up, the eastern end of the state. We'll end up in Walhalla and Cavalier and Langdon and a few other fun towns on this trip. But, these towns bring up the topic of today's video. I've actually been in small schools my whole life. I was a student in a small school my whole life. I went to a small college. I went on to teach in small rural schools. It's my world, so I really can't contrast it with anything. So I have included in the video description links to two videos. I have done retrospectives of two of the towns where I've taught. I want to do one more of a former town, and of course I'm not going to do one on my current town because I'm still there. So anyway, I just want you to keep this perspective, or lack of perspective, depending on how you interpret it, in mind as you listen to me talk in this video. My largest school was as a student teacher. There were around 200 students per class. I never knew the names of most of the teachers, let alone most of the students. Now, would it have been different had I stayed? Probably. And again, I'm not criticizing or elevating larger schools. I have no experience there. I can't talk intelligently about that. Let's be fair. I found out last week that I have a new colleague in the elementary school that I don't know. I didn't recognize her at all. Admittedly, I don't get to the elementary school end of the building because, yes, we are in a single building very often. It may be all one building, but, as a K-12 staff, we don't get together much. By national standards, my school district is small and rural. We have about 500 kids, K-12. We also cover a little over 1,200 square miles, so, bigger than the state of Rhode Island, but a few fewer students. And generally about 2 sections per grade. I started my career, once I got a full-time job and I wasn't substituting or filling in for a sick teacher long term. I started my career in a school of 160 students, K-12, and that was only around 300 square miles. It was a school with 1 section per grade, and it was shrinking. Like most schools in rural North Dakota, it was shrinking. During my time there, 2 other neighboring districts closed, and I know of 5 districts that had already closed, and these were, at one time, K-12 districts. So people have commented on that occasionally in my videos, and that would be a good topic too for a future video, but that's not my topic tonight. So there is a certain sense of doom, especially back then. Even the kids were feeling it. They would ask me what I'd do after the school closed. And to be fair, that school is a lot smaller now, but it is still open. The oil boom helped with that. Will the school still be there when I retire? We'll see. If I go with a minimum retirement age to get my benefits and all that, I'll have to be 60, so we're talking 13 years from now, so we'll just see. So while I'm being negative, because we're going to do something positive yet, what else? Courses are limited in these small schools, and I mean things like foreign language, advanced courses, special interest courses, and more. And it's hard to attract teachers. And once you attract them, how do you keep them? With the current shortage, because we do have a teacher shortage in this state. It may be national also, but it's also in this state. How do you attract new teachers? In these small rural schools, salaries are often lower. I have to switch hands with my notes here because I'm getting a cramp. There are few amenities in these towns or schools, and a new teacher can feel extremely isolated. They are frequently the only teacher in their subject area or grade level. And will they stay? These schools can suffer from high turnover. And unfortunately, North Dakota does not keep good statistics on this, so I can't give you good factual referenced information. I wish I could. And what happens when a school can't fill a position? Maybe other staff can cover it. Maybe we'll go with ITV, which is interactive television, or online courses. Or maybe the school will cut courses. So now the teachers who remain are overloaded. Even if they have smaller class sizes, they will have a large number of diverse courses and age levels to prepare for. In elementary, they may have multiple grades in the same classroom. And never mind extracurriculars and other duties, there aren't many to cover these things, so teachers have to take over multiple extracurriculars and extra duties, often for a laughable salary, if any. And there is small-town life where your private business is everyone's business. So why do it? A lot more people are asking that question. And it's not just hitting rural schools. Even larger schools are getting hit by the teacher shortage. But there are two phenomena worth noting. One is the phenomenon of teachers who will wait in cities and work as substitutes and temporary jobs until they can get a full-time position in the city school. Another interesting phenomenon occurs in small schools located near larger places. There are teachers who live in the city and drive to a neighboring small town even when they could easily be teaching in the city. Be honest, I'd love a study of how many see this, or the opposite, because the opposite happens too. I'd love to find a study that tells me how many of each there are. I know anecdotally I've met more who live in the city and teach in the small town, but I have known those who live in the small town and teach in the city too, so make of that what you will. So these small schools must be offering something. These teachers will take a lower salary, a longer commute maybe, for a reason. And do you really think it's just because they weren't good enough to get a job in a larger school? And what about all the teachers who chose small schools as their career? Is it really because they're not good enough to work in a larger school? Or do these teachers see something in rural schools and communities that make them choose to live there? And that's what I'm leaning toward. And as I stated earlier, I'm not criticizing or elevating larger schools. I'm just talking about the schools I've known my whole life. Did I stay in small schools because of my comfort level? Was I too afraid to try something new? Maybe. But I'm also, let's be honest, I am 2,000 miles from home and everyone and everything that I knew. I dropped it all in a hot minute and moved across the country. So, yeah, don't come tell me that I'm just scared to try something new. So, yeah, I don't think I'm afraid of new things, new experiences. Finances may limit me, but not fear. Even if I were still teaching rural Pennsylvania, that's not evidence. So let's set that talking point aside. You don't know, and I don't know. Instead, let's talk about what is attractive in a rural area. So, in a small enough school, a class becomes almost like family. And yes, some families are dysfunctional, but your family contains all sorts of characters you accept because they are family. That crazy right-wing uncle, the elderly aunt who's still a hippie, and more. You accept family because, well, that's all there is. And though they may squabble, family ultimately have each other's backs. Or at least they should. I've seen surprising friendships in these rural schools. I've even been part of these surprising friendships. People you might never interact with, given more choices, become part of your social circle. And I think, on the whole, you're better as a result. Is there pressure toward conformity? Certainly. And it can be very isolating. Who am I going to discuss fountain pens and science fiction with? That was the story of my whole high school career. I definitely was the misfit in my class, and I felt it, and it hurt sometimes. On the other hand, on the day I wrote these notes, I was part of a discussion on agricultural equipment. I garden. I am no farmer. But I have learned to appreciate the wider world that I live in. Teachers often take on a parental role in this family. At one time in my career, I taught grades 7 through 12 science. I was the only science teacher in my school district. Now, I only teach select grades within my school district, but, I'm part of 2.14 science teachers, so. But the other benefit there in a small school is you get to see these kids grow up. And it is a good feeling to see a child become an adult and know that you had something to do with that. Stay in that school long enough, and you're an institution. And yes, I currently count several students or spouses of students among my colleagues. An awesome student took over my old job in West Hope and is doing an amazing job there. And yes, speaking of family, it's really something to meet students as adults. One student told me I was the worst teacher she's ever had in her entire life. Most of them have a more nuanced perspective. For the most part, I'm apparently not particularly memorable. And honestly, I can describe most of my teachers that way. So, we have more of an impact on them as kids. As adults, they get a more adult perspective and they get to see more people, a wider range of people as influences on their lives. Which is as it should be. I hate to think that I, as a teacher in high school for just a few short years, would be the major impact on a kid's life. Maybe, it's a responsibility, but I like to think I'm one of many influences in their lives rather than the key influence. Another boon of teaching in a small school is just the wider perspective that you get. My degree is actually in physics. And I've taken enough grad school math courses that I'm certified to teach math. And I'm working on doing the same crazy thing with computer science because, I'm crazy. But anywho, I've taught a lot of grades 7 through 12 in both science and math. And apparently an elective or two make me qualified in biology or geology and oceanography and etymology and lots more courses, here, at least here in North Dakota. But one thing I have learned is a lot about the connections between the sciences. This may be not AP physics or something, but I am definitely seeing that, conservation of energy really does play into every single science. And when I was the only science teacher, I could work hard on bringing out those connections. In fact, if I were paid enough, that could drag me back into a smaller school. I miss that amount of control. On the other hand, If you're in a small school, that means you have no one to confer with and bounce ideas off of. But then I tend to be kind of a control freak and a loner, so, I'm antisocial and all that. But let's be honest, it's good to be needed. When I got my first job, I was the only applicant. And frankly, right now, I know that if I were to quit my current job, it's likely that no one will apply for it. And I've already seen it. The other science teacher has been replaced several times, and we were within a few weeks of within a few weeks of the start of school when we found the person who currently holds that position. And that was just by a really desperate, dramatic search to find someone. I don't know what we would have done if we wouldn't have found her. But we were close to not finding her. And right now, I'm teaching some math classes. Well, a math class. Let me rephrase that. I'm teaching a math class and another course, mostly because we couldn't find a math teacher. Luckily, we had more of them than we had science teachers, so we were able to share the course load around a little more. But we are not finding teachers. And that's not just the school where I work. That's schools across this state and across this country. Positions are going unfilled. So yeah, it is good to be needed. And it is security. I'm not just going to get laid off. They're going to go, if they decide they want to get rid of me, it's going to be a whole process. And there's going to be a lot of opposition because how do we get a replacement? So that's something to be said. And more than even the security, there is something to be said for just knowing that your job has value. I want to be more than an interchangeable widget. Or I think one of my nightmare jobs would be to be a salesperson. Here, you need this, because, I want to make commission and stuff. Ew. I like that my job isn't like that. And of course, a small school is besides being a family, it's a community. I've talked about losing my eyesight a few years ago. Well, 20 years ago, at least, briefly, due to an accident. And my colleagues and students took care of me. Some students, who were actually kind of difficult students, actually came over and mowed my lawn because I clearly couldn't. My classes were taken care of by my colleagues. The science they taught may have been more than a little bit questionable, but they tried. And when I decided to leave that job, that was what made it so hard to leave. It was like leaving your family. When I student taught in that largest school, we had a substitute teacher who was a World War II veteran. He ended up with a medical condition. The entire school came together to help pay for his medical bills. Set the horror of needing help to pay for life-saving medical treatment aside. This is a whole school district supporting him. It was a community. And I'm not saying, again, that large schools don't have this. But everybody had that personal connection to the guy, whereas in a large school it'd be more like, oh, that's that substitute that I've never had. So a few years ago I got to take some classes in Bismarck, Fargo, and Minot. And I came to really appreciate especially Fargo and Minot, and I'm not disparaging Bismarck. It was just certain things that I got to see in Bismarck and Minot that I enjoyed. In Fargo and Minot that I enjoyed. So in Fargo, my class was at the North Fargo High School, and I could walk there from the motel that I chose. And seriously, I love being able to walk to work, and that is a very real perk of teaching in rural U.S. I've been teaching since the fall of 1999, and every single job I've had, I have always walked to work. That was one of my goals that I set for myself back when I was in college. I wanted to walk to work. And I've had that because my towns that I've always lived in are small. When I took my class in Minot, a bus took us from our motel to the school. Honestly, one of the problems there, the school, it was a inner city school. I mean, inner city for Minot, not inner city for those of you in like New York City or anything. But the school did not have enough parking for all the people taking classes. So I loved that we rode in a pretty full bus. My car basically sat for a week. It was awesome. Fargo North High School has a pretty cool setup where all the freshman classes share a common area. The same for all the sophomores. Minot was a very, very old school from the 1920s, and it was kind of a maze, but it had a similar setup for freshmen and sophomores who were in Central High School. And then there was another high school for 11th and 12th grade. So, even these large schools are attempting to create that family community feel. I don't teach in one, so I can't talk to their success, but there is something to be said for being part of a smaller community where you actually know everybody and you're connected. So is a rural or city school for you? It's hard to say unless you've taught in both. I really haven't. So I can't say, I've been told, I had one former colleague tell me I was wasting my life by staying where I'm at. But I do know people who have taught in both. Of course, most of those I know chose the rural school. Not always because that was their preference. Sometimes it was because of who they married or whatever. Others, it was their preference. I know a few who moved to larger schools. I don't know as many, but I know some. One of them is happier because she's not the only one teaching her subject. She loves being able to collaborate on her subject. I know somebody else who is a lesbian, and she's happy because she doesn't have to hide it anymore. And are there small schools where she wouldn't have to hide it? Yeah. But where she was, she did have to hide it. So my main point in this video was to share teaching in small rural schools. Maybe you have experiences you can add to broaden the story. So anyway, I want to thank you for watching. And we'll be back in hopefully about 2 weeks with another driving video. And there is good scenery and exciting stuff coming in the background behind this. I might even have to get off the subject of the video and actually talk about what's running in the background later on. So, thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.